What is up, y'all? Des the Mess back once again. My pronouns are still they, she. We are about to dive right back into the work we're doing in the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, starting off with There is a Solution. And boy, when I tell you there is one. This is actually a re-recording of a video because I found out that my last two videos were quiet as fuck and I just wasn't having that. So I did some messing around with the mixer and changed a few things, and this sound quality appears to be better. So I'm going to stick to this. I've got a new mic on the way, so upcoming videos will be using that one. But while I got this one and I want to, get the fire rolling, here we are. So let's dive right back into the book. Chapter 2. There is a solution. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women, or non-binary people, or people who don't identify anywhere, who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. We are average Americans, most of us. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix. But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him, and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. I want to dissect a few things here. I just went over a lot. That was a big, almost 2 pages there. First thing, the opposite of addiction is connection. Why do I say this? There was an experiment called Rat Park. Long story short, scientist puts a rat in a cage with water and cocaine water, nothing else in it, no other rats. He keeps going to the cocaine water until he dies. Scientist uses the same cage with the same water and the same cocaine water. This time puts a bunch of rats in with toys and playground sort of situation. The rats mostly ignored the cocaine. Why? Because they had distractions and they had a more fulfilling life. Now, if rats can do it, I think humans can do it. And what I mean by that is, we fill our lives with chemicals and distractions and all sorts of other, negative coping mechanisms, maladaptive behaviors, perhaps. And by reinforcing our lives with positive coping mechanisms, with people, connection becomes the opposite of addiction. It's not sobriety. Sobriety is a path, of course, just as much as harm reduction is. But the true power comes from connection. This is going to be the theme throughout this chapter. Second part, the italicized part that I pointed out. The ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Again, connection is the opposite of addiction. And I say that because they'll say somewhere else in the book, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. What I mean by that is, your friends, your family, your partners, your loved ones, your teachers, your probation officers, your whoever is asking you, doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, whoever is asking you, whoever is prompting you, whoever is pleading with you, begging for you to stop using drugs and alcohol is not going to be as effective as someone who's walked in your shoes or walked a path similar to yours and be able to say, I know where you've been and I can help you. Two or more alcoholics, addicts, substance users gathered together with the purpose of making some sort of recovery are far more powerful than one person alone. It's going to be the theme of this. I think from personal experience, I can say that reaching out to another alcoholic or addict, a person in early recovery, has been more fulfilling, just as much as others reaching out to me when I was in early recovery than a doctor who told me I shouldn't smoke weed by myself, my therapist who for years told me I shouldn't smoke weed by myself, my parents who nagged me to quit smoking weed and stop doing hallucinogens, my partners who would ask me and beg me sometimes not to drink. None of that shit mattered because I didn't have someone else to say, look, man, I've been here before. Actually, that's kind of a lie. My grandfather is a recovered alcoholic. He passed away last year, and I miss him immensely. I'm not going to get too much more sidetracked, but he was someone who really pushed me in a positive way with the attraction rather than promotion of the program by just being a pretty good dude. All that being said, when I was more surrounded by people who were in recovery and or wanting to make a lasting recovery, that's what really worked for me. That's, I believe, why my counseling career is, that's where it comes from, is helping another addict or alcoholic because I have the lived experience. So, that the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, just said that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. When I think of this, I think of me being in early recovery, having old timers, and I mean that in the most respectful way, people who had a lot of sobriety and were also old enough that like they've retired or they're not working a whole lot. They kind of make their lives giving back to other alcoholics, especially newcomers. There's something, I can't quite describe it unless you know what I'm talking about. There's just something about the feeling of someone who's got 25, 30, 40 years of sobriety sometimes looking at you, a youngster, in your 20s or 30s, 40s. I don't know. My audience is probably going to be millennials, Gen Z. But there's something special about that. Someone who has, we'll say, 25 years of sobriety looking at me with a week, scared shitless, like, I have to fucking never do drugs or alcohol again. What the hell am I gonna do? And them just being like, dude, it's one day at a time. How do you think I got here? One day at a time. And just reminders like that. All these little AA isms, the mantras and the creeds and the all the little sayings that people love to hate until they love them. It's just magical. I can't explain it any other way. You gotta feel it, you gotta experience it to know it. If we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result, but the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Again, this was written in the 30s. Close by hundreds is probably a misnomer compared to common numbers. I don't know what the stats are. I'm not going to look them up. Maybe I should have before I started reading this, so I could have been like, well, actually, I'm not going to get into that. I'm just glad that the point that they're making is people drop off every day. That's something I have written in on the front cover of my big book, and I will show you. People will die. My first sponsor when I was in rehab told me to write that in there. And yeah, so this is my original 2018 big book. It is worn, the spine is busted. I've carried this thing across states. It's been to Pennsylvania. It started in Ohio, and it's made its way out here to California, and every state that I crossed in between to get out here. All of that is to say that the numbers are going to be at least a little bit off because this was written in the 30s. So, I don't want to exaggerate. I'm not going to come up with a number off the top of my head. The point is, lots of people are dying. And not everyone has the opportunity that we have to get better. And I think that's, a larger societal issue. I don't want to get too sidetracked because I do want to make it through the chapter, but you know me. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend on our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. That line right there cuts me like a fucking knife. I say that because I often struggle to meet people where they're at politically. If I disagree with them on politics, philosophy, social issues, it's really hard for me, human to human. I respect someone else as a human being. I want them to recover. And then there's something in me that's like, you disagree with me on this specific social issue, fuck you. That's something I need to work on. It's something I recognize. The goal here isn't for me to argue with other people and, get in such a way where I'm self-righteous and, I say that being on YouTube talking about politics and whatever else and how my politics and religion intertwine with the big book. But the point is, I'm not here to shout at people about how they're wrong. And when I do that, I immediately feel shitty about it. The goal for me is not to sit here and tell you, you're wrong, fuck you, therefore you don't deserve recovery. Everybody deserves recovery. It doesn't matter where they come from, what their beliefs are. All of that being said, it's about me to build up my tolerance and patience and know some fights aren't worth having. And sometimes a guy saying a shitty thing at a meeting that I disagree with, politically, socially, whatever, has nothing to do with me. It's about how I respond rather than react. So, our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend on our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Cut and dry. I'm recognizing that this is something I need to work on. I just wanted to name that. You may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless, you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of an expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many times people have said to us, "I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him, but there he is, all lit up again." Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. This goes back to what was on the 2 pages prior, that it's often easier for one person struggling with addiction to reach another than it is for anybody on the outside of addiction who doesn't understand what it's like to walk this road to try and tell us, you got a problem, you might want to do something about it. It didn't matter to me that like I said, my doctor told me not to smoke weed alone, and my therapist told me not to smoke weed alone, and my dad was yelling at me because I called off work to smoke weed on my mom's porch. None of that shit mattered to me. Like, my parents literally staged an intervention for me to stop smoking weed, and I still kept smoking weed. The point is, I didn't have people in my life at that time who were reaching out to me and saying, like, hey, there's a better way to do this. You don't need to get high today. I never have to get high again. I never have to get drunk again. Now I know that, and now I love that and appreciate that. But back then, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what anyone else was telling me. You know, I can take it or leave it. I know people who smoke weed once a year, and that's their thing. And you know what? Good on them. I can't do it. They can leave it alone. Why can't I? Because there's something going on up here. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor, becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome, and may even need medical attention. But what about the real alcoholic? And I believe that should be in quotes, real alcoholic. He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always, more or less, insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around, yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over the house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Want to point this out because it's extremely important to recognize. I've been to meetings in Pennsylvania and Cleveland where specifically, and I'm not saying it's all meetings, I'm just saying those are places where I have been to meetings where this happens. They say, keep your issues to alcohol, don't talk about drugs. And here we are saying, for one reason or another, whether someone is prescribed or is taking them recreationally, self-medicating, uppers, downers, all-arounders, they're, in this case, talking about a sedative being used to quiet their nerves so they can get through the day at work. That's, first of all, that's, depending on how you look at it, a method of harm reduction, right? Medical assisted treatment, if you're doing that alongside a doctor's recommendation. You can't lay off the bottle at night, so you do some benzos during the day. That's what you do when you're going through withdrawal. But if you're using it on your own, it's self-medication, it's problematic. The point I'm trying to get across is, I hope that if you are at an AA meeting, no one ever tells you you're not welcome there because you have a drug problem and not an alcohol problem. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. Asterisk, using. The reason I say asterisk is because not everyone is a real alcoholic, which is where I was going back to that needing to be in quotes on the previous page. Some people, me, I'm a binge drinker. I don't know if I qualify as a real alcoholic. I didn't drink every day, didn't drink multiple times a day, but every time I drank, I blacked out. And I would binge for a weekend or a week. I was day drinking at one point. Shit was getting bad. Does that disqualify me compared to someone who had cirrhosis of the liver, compared to someone who, becomes homeless from a heroin problem? I don't think so. I think that, as they say in the rooms, one is too many and 1,000 is never enough. When I put one chemical in me, or I'm learning, that chemical can be oxytocin or dopamine too. I can get it from other people. When I get some sort of hit or high off of a chemical, I want more of it. Why? Because I'm a substance user. I might be in remission. I might be sober over 5 years at this point, but the mindset is still there. There's something wired in my brain that says, that feels good, please do it again. That feels good, please do it again. Until I kill myself or hurt someone else, or worse. The point is, never let anyone tell you that you're not welcome at an AA meeting because your problem is drugs, or because you are mixing drugs with alcohol. Because for me, it's substance use disorder, clinically speaking. Alcoholism is an expression of that. It's a self-identification. It's a label that people adopt to join the social club of Alcoholics Anonymous, to be part of the fellowship. You know what else you don't need to say to be in AA? My name is Desi and I'm an alcoholic. I've heard people say, my name's Desi and I'm a person in recovery. I'm an alcoholic and my problem is Desi. My name is Desi and I'm working on it. My name is Desi and I'm just glad to be here today. Find what works for you, make it work, and don't let anyone tell you to do it any other way. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, again, that should be in quotes, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol whatever, or drugs, or dopamine, or oxytocin, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, rather than in his body. Asterisk. This is an asterisk I'm bringing up again. When they say that, this is the 1930s. What they didn't have, that we now have the language for, is a biopsychosocial model of addiction. Bio meaning genetic, psycho meaning generating in the mind, social meaning environmental. All of those things influence someone who struggles with substance use disorder. If I'm born into a family that's predisposed to alcoholism, and around me those people are actively drinking, and I find friends who are actively drinking and using alcohol and drugs, and then on top of that, I begin to engage in it, I am now creating a pattern for myself. Biologically born, genetically predisposed to addiction. Psychologically pick up the pattern, socially reinforce it by being in situations that bolster my addiction and my using. All of that wraps up to create this cyclone that they didn't necessarily have the language for. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm saying they were onto something. We just have different, arguably better language to describe it now. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off, or become irritated and refuse to talk. Another asterisk, and this is one that I'm writing in, or saying, people who use drugs and alcohol often know why they do it. Maybe they don't know why the pattern comes into play, right? Because again, there's that biopsychosocial model. But we're not stupid either, right? I knew every time I smoked weed, I wanted to achieve some sort of specific effect, and I was chasing that. I found euphoria, I found relaxation, I forgot my problems, literally, because I lost my short-term memory. All of that was an escape, and I was using that as an escape. I knew that. I might not have recognized it as addiction, but I knew why I was using the drug. It made me feel better, and I wanted to do a lot of it. And one was never enough. Or one was too much, and 1,000 was never enough. Because I wanted to max out. There's something in my brain, psychologically. There's something in my body, biologically. And I was reinforced socially by the people, places, and situations that I was around that created this perfect storm that made me an addict. A substance user. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and I don't believe... That's another thing I actually disagree with here. I don't believe all addicts and alcoholics, people who struggle with substance use disorder, I don't believe they're all liars. There are plenty of good people who struggle and don't end up becoming serious liars. But I also understand where they're coming from in the book, that a lot of people are hiding drugs and alcohol from their loved ones because of the shame, the stigma, the taboo that's involved in having a drinking or drug problem. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Again, sometimes that's true, and other times we know exactly what we're doing. I'm taking this first drink or drug knowing it will probably end up in more. Maybe there's times where I thought I'm just going to have a beer and then I end up having 2 or 3. Maybe there's time, I can think of a time where I bought a 12-pack and I fully intended to have at least half of it in an hour, and I did. The point is, I knew I was taking that first drink, and I knew why I was taking that first drink, because I wanted to have 5 more after it. So, some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. Another sidebar here. Other people tend to notice when a person has a drug or alcohol problem long before the person is struggling with it. That's not true in every case. I recognized for sure I needed to smoke weed every single day or I didn't feel right. I had mood swings. I became depressed. I was anxious and cranky and emotionally abusive. I knew all of that. It still didn't stop me. It also didn't convince me I was an addict. However, other people pointing it out to me didn't help either, even if they knew that's what was going on. In the same respect, other people see change in you long before you see it in yourself. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Positive change, I should say. But that's the reality, is we don't always see what's going on with ourselves until someone else points it out. Hey, you know what? You did a really good thing there. Hey, you know what? I think you're struggling with this. Depending on the type of validation or criticism that we're getting and who it's coming from, that's important too. It either sinks in or it doesn't. And that's a really important point to make. Other people will see this happening in us long before we do. Good, bad, or neutral. This next part is italic, so hold on to your seats. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. When they say choice, they don't mean, am I going to have beer or wine? Sometimes, yes. What they mean here, very specifically, is that I don't know if I'm going to have just one or 1,000. I don't know if I'm going to stop that day. I don't know if I'm going to stop after the first drink that night, or if I'm going to go on drinking until who knows when, regardless of the consequences. I've lost the power of choice in drink and drugs and oxytocin and dopamine, and some people have that with adrenaline. Not really my thing. I can get pretty amped up here, but the point is, we lose the power of choice. We keep looking for it. We want a very specific kind of thing that we can't get anymore, and we're going to continue to chase it regardless of the consequences. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. When they say that, they don't mean being in recovery. They're talking about being active using and being in early recovery. The point of getting into a program such as AA, such as NA, such as SMART. You can read my description for any other programs that you're interested in. But if we're here, we're talking about AA. The point of getting into AA or therapy or counseling, or I can name 1,000 other things. The point of getting into these things to get into recovery is because I don't have defenses against the first drink, the first drug, the first person, the first dating app that I want to swipe on, the social media, the video games that I want to play for 12 hours. I don't have coping skills and proper defense mechanisms put into place that would say, hey, you know what? This isn't necessarily what I want to be doing with my life. I can do something different and better. We are without defense against the first drink in active use and early recovery. Today, my defense is to call somebody, usually my sponsor and or a close friend, go to a meeting, read a book, do a video, play some music, play video games for an hour or two. I have coping skills. Why? Because I'm in recovery. I now have defense against the first drink. It's not that I don't have cravings. It's not that the thought doesn't cross my mind. 6 months ago, I wanted to get wasted and see whatever happened. And you know what I did? I called people and I cried about it. And then I went to a fucking meeting and I read some more of this book and I internalized it. And now here I am 6 months later yelling at you about it. We are without defense against the first drink until we build these coping skills, until we build these defense mechanisms, until we call people and go to meetings and read books and work on ourselves. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, "It won't burn me this time, so here's how." Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, "For God's sake, how did I ever get started again?" Only to have that thought supplanted by, "Well, I'll stop with the sixth drink," or "What's the use anyhow?" We are without defense against the first drink and have lost the power of choice in drink. Period. Point blank. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history, but for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. Italics. Title of the chapter. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools, coping skills, defense mechanisms, spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Bill W. went through belladonna treatment, aka he dropped acid a couple times trying to cure his alcoholism. There was a period where he thought everybody should do that because he thought it would cure alcoholism. He was kind of a goofy guy. I've dropped acid enough times to know it did not cure my alcoholism. I was still an alcoholic. The point is, he believed the feelings and experiences that he had were part of a fourth dimension. And he said he compared that to the feelings he got when he was fully connected in his recovery to other people. Reiterating the point from earlier, connection is the opposite of addiction. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, asterisk, fully explained Appendix 2. We're about to fucking go there. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. Ready for this? My favorite part in the whole goddamn book. The spiritual appendix. Appendix 2, spiritual experience. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening, are used many times in this book, which, upon careful reading, shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes, or religious experiences, must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that, in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. This goes back to what I was saying earlier. Other people tend to notice our changes long before we do. They notice as we steep into addiction, and they notice when we change and come into recovery. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. Connection is the opposite of addiction. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. This is my favorite line, and I think the most important line in this whole damn book. For those of us who struggle with higher power, God, whatever. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. I'm going to read that again for emphasis. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Don't know if you can tell, but I've got that one almost memorized. I fuck up sometimes. But it's my favorite line in the whole book, and here's why. I'm a Satanist, right? According to Satanism, in various branches is about I-theism, self-deification, I'm supposed to be the God in my life. How do I displace that if I'm supposed to be turning my will and my life over to the care of a higher power, right? Step 2 says, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him. I've dissected this in my first video of the series. I'm going to dissect it a little bit here. Came to believe, that's pretty simple language, that a power greater than myself, connection, is the opposite of addiction. Came to believe that a power greater than myself, a connection to someone or something greater than me, could restore me to sanity. Then made a decision. Making a decision is not the same as action. 3 frogs sit on a log, 2 decide to jump. How many are left? All 3, because making a decision is not following through with the action. Made a decision to turn our will, our thoughts, and our life, the culmination of our actions, so made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. Great outdoors, grace over drama, group of drunks, good orderly direction. I've got 10 more of those. I'm not going to list them all. Made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood God. When I think of that, and I think of this line, with few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. I've broken down step 2, I've broken down step 3, we're about to break down this line. With few exceptions, rarely if ever, with few exceptions, almost everybody, our members of AA, members of 12-step programs, find that they have tapped, received, connected to an unsuspected inner resource. ambition, motivation, growth, that idea that I want to change my way of living. How do I do that? Which I presently identify with my own conception. I come to understand that this motivating factor in me is my own conception of a power greater than myself. You know what's a power greater than me? The law, my friends, a teacher, God, if I believe in God. And I don't, but I'm saying these are all things that are greater than myself. The great outdoors, okay? The ocean. I hear a lot of people say that here in California, specifically San Francisco and apparently in LA. The ocean is my higher power. The fucking moon. Gravity itself is a power greater than me. So, last time, with few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. For me, my definition of spirituality is about my connection to other people and the world around me and a better sense of myself. If I'm being spiritual, I'm connected to a higher version of myself. I want to connect to other people and I want to connect to the world around me. Why? Because connection is the opposite of addiction. Therefore, this power greater than myself, my connection to other people, in this case, is a power greater than myself. Why? Because I can't do this alone. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception. My idea of a power greater than themselves. My idea of a power greater than myself is my connection to other people. You know what that means? I go to meetings. I call people. I fucking pray. You would ask me when I started this series, I wasn't praying. I didn't really believe in it. I've done affirmations before. I've done setting positive intentions. I pray now. I pray to the metaphor of Lilith. Why? Because Lilith, as an idea, an archetype, a fucking concept, is a power greater than myself. That is a connection that I have made. I don't believe there's an actual deity or some tangible or intangible Lilith that I can connect to. It's just a metaphor that I use to connect to my ideas. And that connection brings me to other people. I want the best for myself. I would think in a world where a Lilith existed, and so did I, because I believe I exist in this world, she would want the best for me. That's easy. I don't have to think of it anymore. Suddenly, I don't care about the capital G God word. Why? Because I've tapped into an unsuspected inner resource, which I presently identify with my own conception of a power greater than myself, which is my connection to others. Connection is the opposite of addiction. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. Just broke that down for you. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. When I walked into AA, I was coming out of a militant atheist phase. I'm not a militant atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't have to. I don't believe in spirits, deities, forces outside of my natural control beyond whatever put the Big Bang into effect. Whatever created this universe is a power greater than myself. I don't have to think about it. I don't necessarily think it's got its hands all over me and whatever else. But I've got these three things: willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness. Right? It says in the next, we find that no one need have difficult with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness. The how of the program, I wish they would have written it this way because it just sounds better. Honesty, open-minded, willingness. The how of the program are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. This section finishes with a quote by Herbert Spencer. I'm not going to talk about his problematic nature. I'm just saying this is a good goddamn quote. And it might have even been misattributed to him. The point is, it's here. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt, prior to investigation. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. Connection, spirituality, is the opposite of addiction. This we did because we honestly wanted to, and were willing to make the effort. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of the celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So he returned to this doctor, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. But this man still lives, in the 1930s he did anyway, and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begins to dominate them. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Asterisk. For amplification, see Appendix 2. With few exceptions, our members find they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Connection is the opposite of addiction. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that, after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that, while his religious convictions were very good, in his case they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself, when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We, in turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God, higher power, inner resource. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living. Grand order of design. Good orderly direction. That really works. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. Repeat, we have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. I'm an atheistic Satanist, and I have faith. You know why? Because I have connection, and connection's the opposite of addiction. And my connection is with other people, which is a power greater than myself. And I have faith that if I do the work and I show up and I surround myself in people who want recovery and better things for themselves, it rubs off on me, and I get a little of that too, as a kickback. I'm not saying it's a profit motive. I'm just saying it's simple math to me. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a loving Creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. Again, they're talking about a capital G God because it was the first 100 alcoholics were mostly, at least culturally, Christian. But they were being very secular and very pluralistic in their approach. They were like, it doesn't matter if you have a God, if you don't have a God, if you have 100 gods, if your God is different than mine. You form a relationship with your Creator. You know what created me? Connection. Okay? I don't want to get gross here, but the connection between my parents is the reason why I exist today. So, in my mind of minds, my connection to other people is going to keep me sober today. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. It's not an AA issue. Anyone telling you that you got to do it Jesus' way or you got to believe in their specific kind of God, they're not sponsorship material for you unless that's something you need to hear. If you are an atheist, or I'm assuming a Satanist, because this is how a Satanist navigates AA, and someone tells you, you gotta believe in Jesus, you gotta believe in God, you gotta do it this way, I'm here to tell you, no the fuck you don't. Don't talk to those people. Surround yourself with people who want what's best for you, and who are willing to help you figure out what works for you. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair, which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. If you have religious trauma, or you weren't raised in a religion and you want to figure out what might work for you, they're saying do it. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. I was a member of the Satanic Temple for 8 years. I incorporated their practices into my AA, and then when we went on to form Sober Faction, I incorporated my AA into that recovery. Okay? Like, I was part of a religion, and I still don't fucking believe in a God. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. I have explained at great length why it works for me. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. They're talking about the steps there. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women, and non-binary people, and agender people, and anybody who's on or off of the spectrum in any way, desperately in need, will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. Thank you. Hail yourselves.